clear of the closing doors, please.
All right, here we go. Subway Sports Talk. My name is Peter Kennedy, and I am your host. Thank you so much, as always, for tuning in to SST on Apple Podcasts app, Spotify, and on YouTube. You can follow us on socials at Subway Sports Talk. Also, don't forget to subscribe, rate, review on your favorite podcast app or on YouTube. We got a first-timer joining Subway Sports Talk today. Very excited to talk to this man because normally when we talk, it's for about somewhere between 3 and 10 minutes as we pass each other in the producer's room, the board op room at WFAN. But now we get to talk shop for real for a little bit longer time. The one, the only, the man they referred to as the Torpedo bat in high school. I think I looked that up on Wikipedia. Conor Green is here. Conor, what's up, dude?
Nothing much. Yeah, normally it's always, you'll be there a couple times a month. You come in the studio, I say, hey, Pete, haven't seen you in a while. And then you go get a coffee, you come back, you take over, and I say, all right, I got to catch my train. I'll see you later. About 5 minutes at most. So it'd be good to actually get to sit down and talk a little bit.
At least you don't hit me with what Rosie does, Paul Rosenberg. Every time he sees me, he just goes, what are you doing here? And one day I'm going to turn around and say, what are you doing here? And then he's going to not know what to say back. But every time he says it, I just laugh because he's right. I'm there like 3 times a month and I'm like there for a midnight to 6 a.m. Like I'll see you this weekend, I'm sure. I'm there midnight to 6 on, Saturday to Sunday and Sunday to Monday. I mean, Friday to Saturday, Saturday, Sunday, whatever. I'll see you then.
It takes a special breed of person to be able to work overnights for long stretches of time. Because you've been doing it for at least... I mean, you didn't get hired much long after I got hired, I feel like. So you've been doing those kind of overnights for a long time. It's tough.
Yeah, I graduated at some point before COVID to the 6 a.m. to noons. That's now the Zoo Meister's role. Zoo's locking those things up right there. But I was doing those a lot. And
we used to do a little bit of the JJ football show that he had. On Sundays
at Red's Ale House.
Yeah, and then Moose would do his show, and Tommy Lugauer would go out and produce. So I would be in the studio, and then you had the Zoo shift, 6 to noon.
Good times. Look at that.
Yeah,
it really is. We're getting old, as we've explained before we started recording. We both hit 30 here, and here we are chasing the dream, talking sports. Yeah. And Conor, I'm excited to have you on here, not just because of your history with the Torpedo bat, but you have an up close and personal look at the Yankees all year. Every year, whether you're producing the games for the radio back in the studio or you're producing the games actually at Yankee Stadium, which, we can talk more about your experiences there as well. But before we get into the first 3 games, which really started off with an amazing smash for the New York Yankees, and obviously we'll talk some New York Mets later. What was your expectations kind of coming into this season? Because I do think it's important to kind of put that basis out there because it's also very easy to get overexcited after one amazing weekend.
I thought before the year, before Stanton got injured, before Cole got hurt, I felt they were going to win the American League because the American League is not very strong this year. They're the best team in the division, I think, by a good amount. I think the Red Sox have gotten a little better. The Orioles are a good team, but they lost Corbin Burns. Their pitching isn't great. There's really nobody in the American League that you feel is clearly better than the Yankees. And while the Yankees lost Juan Soto, you had Cody Bellinger, Max Fried, Devin Williams, who looked a little bit shaky in his first outing on opening day. Hopefully that's not a sign of things to come. But I thought they were a really good team. And it hurts to lose somebody like Juan Soto, but you're playing, in the American League, which is weak. They have a good roster. They've added a lot of good players. And then, of course, when you add in the Torpedo bat, which I didn't know about, I mean, forget it. How can you lose at that point? So that was my expectation before the injuries. Afterwards, after Cole got hurt and after Stanton got hurt, I had a little bit of concern because you already had what you felt was a hole at third base. You had a rotation now where you had a bunch of guys go down, Heels down, Cole's down, obviously the big one. So I had a little bit of apprehension about what was going to wind up happening. But I had a lot of confidence in the team, and I'm one of the guys that's pretty defensive of Brian Cashman. Normally, he figures things out. So I felt after the injuries, I felt if they weren't going to win the American League, I felt they would go to the ALCS.
Yeah, the only time I ever feel really inclined to push back on Cashman is when you want one more step forward, right? When you want to take that one extra swing to really go for it like he did with Juan Soto last year, that's when I'll get frustrated with Brian Cashman. But as a Mets fan especially, in this town, watching this team win 90 games every freaking year, I was going to say it's their job, which it is their job, right? That's their job to win 90 games if you're the New York Yankees. He puts together a damn good roster every year. He puts together amazing pitching staffs every single year. So it is hard to criticize him too much. However, I do understand the frustrations of some Yankee fans. But I think with
I
this
mean, they
first, oh,
haven't,
go ahead.
Pete, they haven't had a losing season since before either of us were born. And we
That's
just talked about how
nuts.
we're starting to
That's
get
nuts.
old, and I wake up in the morning, my back hurts, my knees hurt. I didn't even work out the day before. So I'm getting old, and they've still never had a losing season with him as the GM. So, and like guys like Billy Beane, who's obviously really respected, he, I think, considers him and has called him the greatest GM in the history of the sport.
Mm.
So there's always like little things you can nitpick with him, but the team always wins. They're always, if they're not going to the World Series, they're always in contention. So it's always hard to really. I mean, I have criticisms of him, and I think they can get a little bit too overly analytical about everything. But I mean, they win games every year.
Yeah, I think the best comparison for teams like the Yankees and now the Dodgers, and hopefully the Mets reach this standard as well because they're kind of knocking at that door. The best comparison is like an NBA star, right? Where it's like, okay, on your come up, you are just the cat's meow. Everyone loves you. You are cool. You are fun, exciting. The world is your oyster. But once you sit up there at that upper echelon for a little while and don't win a championship, you only get nitpicked. You only get criticized. And of course, you're going to have your stands and the people across the NBA, the big ones that come to mind, the Chris Pauls who never won, the James Hardens who's never won, a lot of these star players, Joel Embiid got a lot of this too. Oh my God, look how amazing, MVP, this is so cool. And then as soon as you're up there for long enough, you're only going to get shit on. That's just what it is. That's where the Yankees have been now for our entire life, like you said. And ever since they won that last World Series in 2009, they've just been chilling at the top and haven't broke through. So again, the frustrations are expected, but they're not always fair. So now with that roster build and all this stuff, we'll talk about the pitching in a second here. This first weekend, Connor, was out of control. You said you were at a couple games in person, right? At Yankee Stadium?
Yeah, I worked the yesterday's game, so I was there for that one. I wasn't there for, unfortunately, the 9 home run game, but I was there for yesterday's game. They hit, what was it, 3 home runs, I think it was.
Well,
I think it's
Judge
now
had one, Jazz had two. I think someone else hit
I think
one,
Ben Rice hit one into
and
the
Ben
second
Rice.
deck.
Yeah, so
So
there's four, yes, I.
they have 15 home runs in 3 games. So of course the big talking point with everybody on the internet, and you've heard a lot of different shows talk about it, is the torpedo bat, which to me it's amazing that nobody, or at least from what I understand, there's not been very many teams that have actually experimented with this. But from what I understand, is the rule is that the barrel of the bat can't be bigger than 2.61 inches in diameter at any point. So as long as you don't break that rule, there's nothing wrong with it. And you've seen people complain. Of course, you got Red Sox fans
Oh
on
my
Twitter,
God.
like the hate
Mets
accounts
fans
who are going,
too.
Mets
Unreal.
fans are going crazy about it. It's within the rules, and it's pretty amazing to me that nobody really has seemed to have tried it. Or I think maybe the Mets had a couple guys
I
last
think
year. Maybe the
Lindor was
Yankees are
trying
just,
it this year.
yeah. So there's been a couple teams that have experimented with it, but it goes to it's that's one of the reasons why everybody who is anti-analytics and anti-analytics departments, the guy who came up with this was an MIT graduate that they brought in, and I don't really know if he had any kind of defined role when he first got there, other than, hey, you seem like a smart guy, try to help us out in some way. And
Make something better.
yeah, and he's designing a bat that is gonna, I guess, help them in a small way. I don't think it's like this game changing thing, but I think you'll see a good amount of teams around the league start to maybe experiment with it. But it's amazing how somebody who's an MIT graduate, I don't think he ever played any sort of major baseball in his life, is designing something. And it goes into like all these other sports. I was watching, I don't know if you ever heard of Ernie Adams with the Patriots, but he was their football research director, and he went on Julian Edelman's podcast. And he never played football, I don't think, in college or anything
Hmm.
like that. He just was friends with Bill Belichick. He wound up working with the Patriots. He was like an analytics guy, and he in the podcast talks about all the different things that they would do to be cutting edge analytically. They would go through all this research and all this film. And so a lot of these nerds that people make fun of, and the Patriots were the best team in football for 20 years.
Yeah.
The Yankees have been on the cutting edge of analytics despite having a huge payroll for all these years. So, they've been awesome in the first 3 games. I don't expect them to be hitting 15 home runs every 3 games, but I think it's reassuring to see that you still have a lot of depth in the lineup, probably more than you did last year. The pitching might struggle at least until some of their guys come back, but they're a very good team, and the lineup's been great.
Yeah, and one of the things that I think about now after this first weekend is it doesn't have to be an X factor outside of Judge. It kind of has to be the aggregate, right? And I think what you saw in this first weekend was, of course, it's a little overblown because everyone hit a home run or two, but it doesn't have to be Wells to bat 320 or have an OPS of 950. It doesn't have to be Bellinger to hit 40 home runs like he did 6 years ago. It has to be all of them sometimes, if that makes sense to me, to you. Like Jazz might be the most trustworthy of a star, if quote unquote, behind Aaron Judge, but he doesn't have to now go and have a semi MVP season for this team to be successful. They really have to be a strength in numbers lineup here because you know what Judge is and how much he can actually shoulder an offense by himself. And it doesn't mean that, oh, if Volpe doesn't, skyrocket his on base percentage to 410, they're screwed. It's like, no, incremental, gains on all these guys' percentages are going to make an astronomical difference. And that's how you replace Juan Soto. And even though it's not realistic for all these home runs, obviously, you have to feel some sense of confidence that it looks like those strides from Wells are real. It looks like Volpe can make something special. It looks like, Bellinger and Goldschmidt have something to offer still. And those collective pieces can at least help, bring the tide up.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the Yankees offseason signings got overlooked because they lost Juan Soto.
Mm.
So if they just say they didn't have Juan Soto last year and they had a good year, maybe they lost in the ALDS or something, but then they brought in Paul Goldschmidt and Cody Bellinger and Max Fried and Devin Williams, it would have been looked at as this awesome offseason. Like these are a lot of, some of these guys are a little bit older, like Paul Goldschmidt, and he's going downhill a little bit. But Paul Goldschmidt, even at his age, I think is a pretty big upgrade over what they got out of first base last year with Ben Rice being a rookie, Anthony Rizzo not being, great and being banged up. Bellinger in the outfield is a huge addition. People kind of forget. Oh, it was only not that long ago that he hit 47 homers, and now he's got the short porch in right field at Yankee Stadium. They have a lineup for the first time in a while where there's a lot of left-handed power and left-handed hitters, which was a lot of people's criticisms over the Judge era. Is too right-handed, so they have a lot of left-handed power hitters. So I thought they had a really good off season. And the Soto thing was interesting because they got a little heat for not bringing him back, and people, if George was here, this would have never happened, and blah blah blah. The Yankees offered him, I think it was north of $700 million. I think at a
it was
certain
750,
point,
apparently.
750. So, and the Mets basically offered him with the opt-in at the 1 year. It's going to wind up being over 800 million. So I think at a certain point they just realized we can continue to negotiate, but Steve Cohen obviously is not going to let anybody beat him for Soto. So like, what can you really do? It's obvious that Soto, one of the main factors, I wouldn't say the only thing that led him to go into the Mets, was that he wanted to be the highest paid player in baseball. And there's other reasons why he liked the Mets. They wanted to allow him to have a suite. They allowed him, I think he has like a jet to fly his family to games. The Yankees, I don't think were willing to do that. So that's also a factor. But I think they realized no matter what we offer at this point, he's just going to go to the Mets, and you have to pivot. And they pivoted with an upgrade at first base, even though Goldschmidt's a little bit older. They brought in Bellinger, Devin Williams at the back end of the bullpen. You hope winds up being, a stud, and they didn't have that last year with Clay Holmes being a disaster, and then they had to move around with Luke Weaver. So, it was a really good offseason. I think Yankee fans are always hypercritical because they feel they should just get everybody, and why isn't everybody the best player? Why isn't every player on the team one of the best players in baseball? But it's just not realistic, especially now that you have so many teams that are willing to spend a good amount of money. But I thought, the offseason was great. You see the first three games, they look like a very good team. You look at the American League, there's just not that many teams that you feel are better than the Yankees.
Yeah, it was an ego blow, frankly, for Yankees fans, right? I've heard so many people say, a bunch of my friends on this very podcast were saying, if the Yankees want somebody historically, they get him. And that was the attitude going in. And then as soon as it seemed like, oh, we might not get this guy, it was, oh, we don't want him, or he only is going for the money, right? So that's why Mets fans are sitting here ultra defensive right now, being like, dude, shut up. And I'm not talking about you, obviously. I'm talking about the greater zeitgeist of Yankee fans here. It's like, you're going to act like you didn't want him. That's a lie. You're going to act like he only chose the Mets because of the dollar amount. No, there's more to the story. He also obviously seems to like the players on the team a lot too. And that doesn't mean he didn't like the players in the Bronx. All right. Two things can be true, which I know you and I believe that, and not many people do. But with the Soto stuff, you know, out of the way now, you have to look at what they did, and you outlined it so beautifully. Now it just comes down to, can 5 guys, right? Can they actually lift that tide? And I guess 5 would be a little bit aggressive because half of them were there with Soto last year. So it comes down to like 2 or 3 guys. Can they create the production that Juan Soto did? And maybe yes, maybe no. We shall see. Does any part of you now, and we'll talk about the pitching in a second, does any part of you now with this huge start to the season make you a little cynical or a little bit nervous that, like, guys, don't blow your load so early? There's a lot of baseball left. All right. Don't use all your home runs now.
Well, I do want Judge to perform better in the playoffs, and so it's one of those things where he's been so, like, Aaron Judge has been, there has not been a player I felt this way about in baseball outside of Barry Bonds. Like, his power is so incredible, and Otani's a great hitter. Soto's a really good hitter, but even those guys, they don't get pitched around like Judge. Like yesterday, he hits the home run, and then they really just didn't want to pitch to him the rest of the game. I think he got on base
3 more walks. Yeah.
He had 3 more walks. I think he was on base 5 times in total. So teams are just terrified to pitch to him. And the only guy I could really say other than Judge that was like that was Barry Bonds. Now, Barry Bonds was a better player. Barry Bonds is like the greatest baseball player I've ever seen. I mean, Barry Bonds had a 600 on base percentage. In '04, he hit 45 homers, despite he walked 262 times. But Judge is getting to the point, like, this is the 3rd year in a row, because he got hurt in 2023 for a little bit on the freak thing at Dodger Stadium. But before that, he was red hot. Last year, he was bad for basically the whole first month of the season, and then just went absolutely wild at the end of the year. So with Judge, it's a little bit like, you come to expect it, even though it's unbelievable what he does on a day-to-day basis. But you just need him to produce in the playoffs, and it's almost to a point where his production in the playoffs last year, the way he's come out this year, it must have been a hugely motivating factor for him, because he has been awesome to begin the year. You wonder how many home runs he can hit. I don't think he can keep up, obviously, this pace, because I think he's probably on pace for, like, whatever, over 200 home runs.
280 home runs or something, yeah.
So that's really the only, like, I don't have an issue with that. The one thing I will say is there is something to be said for the Yankees in a couple of the years here recently. The first, like, 2 months or month and a half of the season, they've been awesome. And then for whatever reason, something seems to happen in the middle of the year where there's a little bit of a lull. And they're not terrible, but they're not nearly as good as they were early in the year. Sometimes it's injuries, but it was, I think, 2022, the year Judge hit 62. They had, like, they're on pace to break the 98 Yankees record for wins. And then they kind of cooled off last year. They got really off to a hot start and then slowed down a little bit. So I don't know exactly what the reason is for that, but if they can try to avoid that in any way they can, maybe the MIT scientists can figure something out with that too. That obviously would be huge, but nothing that really makes me super apprehensive about them. They've been awesome. The first 3 games is about as good as you'd want to see them.
Yeah, I think with the lull that they've kind of hit, that when you start so good, though, it doesn't matter, especially in this American League right now where there's no juggernauts, right? If you're in the division with the Dodgers, who are also going to push for 100 wins or maybe more, I think their over under was 104. Then you're on a different playing field. But with the Yankees, they run out to this crazy lead in the AL East, and then what happens? Like, maybe they play 500 ball for a month or two, but they're still 10 games above 500 or 10 games above in the AL East. And I think last year with the Mets kind of being side by side, here in New York, it was very easy to see it and say, oh my gosh, the Mets have been the best team in baseball since June. And the Yankees record since June has been, like, mediocre. Right. But the Yankees still had a better record, right? Because they did get off to that crazy good start. The Mets got off super slow last year, obviously. It was very well documented. But as my one friend always says this, he goes, you can't win the division in April, but you can lose it. And the Yankees have been really good at never losing a division this early. They always start strong, and that helps them kind of glide through with some of the lulls, which are realistic here. If we're being completely realistic about this season and this outlook here, with the health of the pitching staff already now, but for the start of the season, and with the bats that you are relying on, there is a chance that there's some cloudy days in the summer here. There is a chance that, Judge, God forbid, he misses a few weeks, like, that offense is going to look really, really different. That's possible. But if you can win the games you're supposed to win early, you can withstand that really well. And I think that's a huge plus for where this Yankees team is at right now. Now, Connor, on the pitching front here, obviously they haven't even gone through the rotation yet, so it's tough to say how the entire rotation's looking right now. But you've seen Fried once, you know, you got to see Nestor on the other side, which was very fun for Yankees fans.
Oh my God. Poor Nestor. I mean, he comes back to Yankee Stadium and just gets bombed.
Just crushed. It was brutal to watch for, I'm sure, Yankee fans at some point too. Be like, oh, this poor guy, get him out of here. But you see Rodon throw a good game, and now you're starting to see what this rotation could look like. Where's your confidence meter, or where was it, I guess, a few days ago, and where is it now on the pitching staff at large?
I was a little bit worried because, when you lose, Heel was awesome last year throughout most of the season, and so that's a big piece to lose. Obviously, Garrett Cole is one of the best pitchers in baseball. Losing him is tough, but I still felt like, people get on Marcus Stroman and he wanted to possibly get traded and all that. But for a third starter, there's not that many teams in the league that have a better third starter than Marcus Stroman. There's very few teams like the Dodgers who you feel like have 5 really good pitchers. So I was a little bit worried, but not too panicked. And my thing with the Yankees is always that their bullpen is always terrific. And that's another one of those analytic things, because I don't know what I would love to know what it is that they identify when they start to look at, bringing in some no-name pitcher in middle relief from like Clay Holmes, for example. What was it that they saw in Clay Holmes where they were like, okay, he's not been great, but if we do this and this, he can maybe be one of the best relievers in baseball. And that's one of those things where Brian Cashman is just a master at. They always seem to be able to. The Tim Hill, I don't even really remember where Tim Hill was before he came to the Yankees.
Right.
But Tim Hill, he goes out there. He kind of looks like somebody that would work at a supermarket. He does not look like a professional athlete, and he's turned into one of like the best relievers in baseball. He comes in every time. He's been great. So they always find great relievers. That's one of the reasons why the Yankees have been good for all these years. Is one of the big factors that differentiates the good teams from the bad teams. Is the bad teams, it always seems like their bullpen just gets hit hard. Even before David Stearns got with the Mets, like that was one of their big issues, is their bullpen just got hit hard. They'd have Diaz, who was awesome, but then getting up to him was a difficult thing. So I was a little worried because when you lose pitchers like that, it's hard to replace them. People want a Cashman to immediately go get replacements, but it's not that easy, and there's not that many good pitchers. So I was a little bit worried, but I felt, Fried, Rodon, Stroman is not too bad. Maybe Will Warren gives you something. Maybe Carrasco's got a little bit left in the tank. But the good thing is you don't feel like these are going to be this is not going to be the rotation come playoff time. So I wasn't too worried about it. And I always feel like they'll figure something out because I have a good amount of confidence in Brian Cashman.
You have to. When it comes to the bullpen, you can criticize Aaron Boone all you want. We haven't mentioned his name too. The track record is that the bullpen's going to be good, right?
Just and then these guys, they'll leave and go somewhere else, and
not the same.
They fall off a cliff. So whatever it is that they, or even Nestor. I mean, Nestor was not great last year, but Nestor goes to the Brewers and immediately, and he might pitch a little better later in the year, but you never feel like, well, you lose a guy and he's going to go off somewhere else other than maybe Soto. They have a pretty good handle on when they let guys go, they sort of drop off. And
Clay Holmes, all right, listen.
Hey, Clay Holmes might be good. Look, the sweeper from Clay Holmes looks awesome. So if he can ever figure out how to control that, he'll be a good pitcher.
Yeah, and that new changeup, whatever they're calling that new changeup, I forget. There's some fancy name for it. That's whatever, weird.
Yeah, it can never be just a changeup anymore, and it can't be a slider. It's something different and a sweeper, and then there's all sorts of new names for everything.
Yeah, for a while the Vulcan change was a big thing. That was the big craze as the rain pours down on the window next to me. I hope you can't hear that on my mic. Do you hear that?
No, I can't hear it.
Oh, wow.
I can hear it outside though. Here too.
We're not far from each other actually. We could
we're
probably
really not.
Outside of this rain, we could have walked to each other's places probably. But here we are in the comforts of our home. Wow, this rain is popping off hard. Anyways, with the Yankees now, I feel like we're in this place where you also give a leash to your franchise, to your fans. This is a leash, this first series. And I think that's a huge win because there's some angst for Yankee fans coming into the season. And frankly, they don't have to now go win, 5 more games in a row here. This first weekend, it does wonders. And I know you and I, working at the Fan, I'm there next weekend. You're there obviously pretty much every day, you're there full time. Fans will use this first weekend as a crutch until they don't have to anymore. So even God forbid they have a rough week coming up, we're good for now. And I think that's nice. Mets fans were the opposite, where they lose 2 games, They get Soto up in the ninth inning with a chance to win it in game one, and every Met fan has a Yankee fan in their life chirping their ear off. Oh yeah, Soto never struck out in the
$800
ninth.
million for this? Oh boy.
Yeah. Oh, he never struck out in the ninth as a Yankee like that. It's like, all right, dude, give us a break for a second here.
Or
Right?
then the post-game interview, they're like, it clearly, you could just tell he realizes he made a huge
Oh,
mistake.
dude.
Like, no, I don't really. He has $800 million coming to him. I really can't imagine he's feeling like he made a mistake about anything.
And let me ask you this, because I give you this credit all the time when I see you in person and on Twitter and stuff, like, and Conor _ Green 51, Conor with one N for the Twitter users out there. You have a great sense of sarcasm on Twitter. Like, you really are one of the ones who can pull it off so well, and I give you credit for that all the time. What were the people seeing truly in that Juan Soto post game that made them jump to a conclusion that he's miserable and he's regretting not staying with the Yankees because of one strikeout in the ninth, where he was probably just upset that he struck out in the ninth?
Right. So if there were two ways that interview could have gone. He could have either done what he did, and then everyone goes, "Oh man, he knows he made a mistake. He wishes he was playing with Judge." But if he did that interview and he was all happy and jubilant, and they'd be like, "Oh, this guy doesn't care about winning. See, we told you it was all about the money." So either way, he was going to get crucified in that. The only way he doesn't get crucified in the post game interview is if he doesn't strike out in that situation.
Right.
It just is what it is. But that's just how baseball season goes. Everybody is always going to overreact, especially to opening day. If you get beat 15-0 in opening day, everyone's going to, oh, we stink. But with baseball, the Mets were a below average team for what, 2.5 months last year,
Sure,
and then
yeah.
they started to play better. The Nationals were under 500 until mid-June, I think it was, or maybe even after the All-Star break, and then they won the World Series. So you can't overreact. Juan Soto does not feel like he made a mistake. I'm sure he feels fine. He plays well. The team's going to be good. The one thing I will say, because I don't think the Mets are a team that can get to a World Series this year, and I think people missed the boat a little bit on the Soto signing. So people felt like because Soto went to the Mets, like that he was this generational talent that was going to turn them into a World Series champion. Like you had some people that felt like we're a World Series team, bop, 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 bop. But for me, what was more important, because I think Soto's an awesome player, and he's obvious, like if you can get him, get him. But what I felt was what was more important is that was like the first time, Lindor a little bit too, that was the first time that you really felt the power of Steve Cohen's money. That was like the first time where you had a guy who not only was considering going to the Yankees, but he was a guy that was actively on the Yankees last year, played in the World Series with them last year, and still chose, for a couple of reasons, one of them being that Cohen offered him all sorts of money, he still chose to go to the Mets. And I made the comparison a couple times, I think, on Twitter, that I don't know if you watch English Premier League soccer at all.
Yeah.
But it's like, even for people that don't, forever, Manchester United was the preeminent team in the English Premier League. They were the Yankees of the English Premier League for years. But all of a sudden, Manchester City got bought by one of those, I think it was a Saudi,
Yeah.
like money conglomerate, and they became the better. Like Manchester United, I think still is a bigger brand because it's kind of known worldwide. But Manchester City has won all sorts of championships because they have the ability. And once you get a couple of guys, then other guys want to go play with those guys. But they have the ability to pay to the point that like their backups are better than a lot of other team starters.
Yeah.
So I think that was more important to me, is like, okay, he has this money. He's been talking about how no one's going to outspend us. Everyone's been saying no one's going to, and it was the first time where you really felt with a lot of competition, because they lost on Otani last year. So did the Yankees. I don't think they really could do anything about it because he wanted to play on the West Coast. They lost out on Yamamoto. This is the first time where it's like, we wanted this guy. I think his whole thing was, I don't care how much he asks for, because we've been talking about how this is going to be a different situation. The Mets are in the market for big stars. That was the first time where they were like, we're going to give him whatever he wants, and they did it. So that to me was even more important, because more important than just Soto himself was them finally saying, we're just going to give him whatever he wants. And now you have a lot of other guys who are going to hit free agency that are going to look at the Mets, and professional athletes all want to make the most money at their position. They have big egos. They're alpha males. They always, a lot of the guys didn't grow up with a lot of money. and they want to make a lot of money. So that's a huge factor. And also, the Mets are going to be a team that's going to generate a lot of stars because they're going to pay guys. They're working on the farm system. So I think it was more of like, this is proof that what they've been saying is true when they signed Soto.
And I think that lends itself to the idea that this is not a 1 year test case. The Yankees got Soto for a 1 year test case and hopefully more. The Mets now have Soto for a decade, right? Decade plus, if we're being honest, decade and a half. So that difference of, oh, if we don't win this year, it's a disaster. That's not the case. If they don't win this year, they keep adding, they keep spending, which is what they're going to do. And then year after year, you become closer and closer to that World Series. And when you see the odds, obviously some of it's juiced up because it's New York. And then because of the big offseason acquisition, but the Mets are, top 5 or 6 in World Series odds. They are top 4 in the NL odds. So they're not far away, but they still are knocking at the door, whereas the Dodgers are inside the door. Even the Braves are probably right inside the, underneath the doorway right there. And the Phillies are right next to them. So all these teams kind of feel like they have a chance, and they should, but fans shouldn't be sitting here saying it's a failure if they don't win the World Series in year 1 because you have this guy for 15 years. So it's a process that has to take place. But I do love the EPL comp. And I think if you ask EPL fans, though, even if Man City's the bigger brand, I think people are calling if Man United is the bigger brand, they're calling Man City the evil empire.
Yeah.
Outside of our guy, Pat Boyle, the big Man City fan over here. We don't got to talk about that, even though I'm a Newcastle fan. They got bought by the Saudis, too. Everyone only criticizes us. Whatever. Man City, Saudi money, too. It's all good. But, if the Mets can become the new version of the evil empire, Mets fans have to be ready to become hated. Yankee fans have dealt with their whole life being the target on everyone's dartboard. Mets fans are not used to that. We're getting a taste of it right now, and a lot of Mets fans are not handling it well, Connor. They are not.
Yeah,
they're criticizing Lindor already. It's been 3 games. He just had a kid. His wife was 9 months pregnant, and he goes 0 for 9. Oh my God, this guy. Why do we still have? What are we doing here, Connor? What is wrong with Mets fans that they are criticizing Francisco Lindor after all he did last year? 1 bad series, and he's getting crap on Twitter. What's going on?
Well, the Mets fans have been the beaten down fan in New York City for a long time. The Yankees have always been the quote unquote big brother team, and the Mets have always struggled, even to where it's different than football because the Giants have obviously been more successful than the Jets. But the Giants are not perennially good every single year. Even the 2 times they won the Super Bowl in the last 20 years, both of those years, even Giants fans were calling for their head coach to be fired.
They're wild
People
cards.
were attacking Eli. So it's not a similar situation where with the Mets and Yankees, the Yankees have basically been one of the top teams in terms of betting odds to win a World Series almost every year, and the Mets have sort of been middle of the pack. But for the first time, they are now in a spot where even they can spend more money than the Yankees, and really they can spend more money than everybody. So when you have the expectation shift, you saw it with Jets fans the last 2 years, where normally when the Jets are bad, you just make fun of them. You laugh about it to a certain extent because it is what it is and you expect it. Last year with the Jets, people were overreacting to everything, and then it went completely downhill, and they had a reason to be overreacting. But it wasn't like just a normal bad year for the Jets because the expectations were so high, and that's why you had a completely ridiculous firing of Robert Saleh in the middle of the season. They fired their GM. It's because they had all these expectations, and then nothing ended up happening, and nothing came of it. So I think Mets fans, for the first time in most of Mets fans' lives, especially older Mets fans, they feel like there's no reason why this team shouldn't win a World Series. We just got Juan Soto. So anytime anything happens, they're going to overreact. And then what Mets fans are not really totally used to is if they don't win a World Series this year, even if it's unfair, you're going to get a lot of the hate from everybody about, oh, you brought in Juan Soto and you lost in the NLDS, or you couldn't even get out of the wild card round. So when in the past, if the Mets made the playoffs, it's like, hey, we're the Mets, we made the playoffs, this is great. But now, and as long as Soto is on the team, which is going to be at least like 15 years, or as long as Steve Cohen owns the team, if the Mets don't go to the World Series, you're going to get a lot of people who are going to be making fun of the Mets and poking fun at the Mets. And so it's a totally different situation.
And yeah, I think all those points is so true, right? Because Mets fans we're just not used to it. Last year was a win for the Mets, right?
Yeah.
They made it to the NLCS. What a win. In my lifetime, 30 years, I've seen them in the NLCS, what? 3? No, well, I guess if you count 2000, 4 times. I was only 6 years old. That was some of my first baseball memories. 4 times.
Yeah.
The 2000 year, The '06 year where they, Carlos Beltran didn't swing the bat, when they made the World Series in 15, and the last year. That's it, right? So it's a different ball game now that you expect to be back there. The Knicks fans are
Yeah.
going through the same exact thing right now. The Knicks fans got a taste of second rounds a couple times, and now it's like, oh, second round failure, season's a failure. Why'd
Right.
you even trade for Mikhail? Why'd you sign OG? This team's not good enough. This team sucks. What like all this stuff? We want Dante DiVincenzo back. It's like, all right, listen.
I mean, to the point now that Knicks fans are like, if they don't go to the Eastern Conference Finals, they should fire Tibbs.
Yeah, Tibbs
Like,
is
do you
done.
guys
He's a bad
remember?
coach. He's
Yeah,
a
do you
bad
remember
coach.
what it was like before Tibbs got there? This team was awful for years. So at least you finally have a team that's competitive.
It's very simple to think about it like that, and that should be the way we think about it. But that's not how fans are, and it's especially not how New York fans are. But let's segue, Connor, back into the actual product that the Mets are putting on, because as we spoke about with the Yankees, this massive burst of offense in the first 3 games, it gives you a little leash, right? So now you're thinking about both teams in New York, and you're saying this Yankees offense, look at them, they're going to be beasts all year. The Mets, granted, here on Monday, as we were recording, I think they're up 10-4. Oh, that just ended. They won 10-4. Alonso hits a grand slam. You get a Marte home run, and you didn't even have Lindor because of the birth of his child. So at least you had that. But before this game on Monday against the Marlins, you were thinking, oh my gosh, is this offense actually not as good as we thought it was? Maybe this depth is not there. What are they going to do? Oh, this offense has trouble. Is that a fair reaction? Do you have real concerns about this offense? Where do you see this Mets offense going now?
I don't have any major. I think the Mets offense is kind of what I thought it would be going into the year. I think Vientos was so good down the stretch last season. He was really good in the playoffs. But it is hard to expect a young guy to continue that kind of production. But he's a very good player, so you expect him to be pretty good. Pete Alonso is I think on the downswing of his career, but you can still expect him to hit 35, 40 homers. And I think there's a chance his batting average is up from last year and he's a little bit better. You know what you're getting from Soto. Alvarez is a good player when he comes back. So I don't have any serious, major concerns about their offense. But at the same time, I do think they were playing over their heads a little bit towards the end of last year because they were just mashing the last, 2 months of the season. And they came to Yankee Stadium and destroyed the Yankees in a 2-game series. Like, they got red hot at the right time. It reminds me a little bit of like the Jets in 2009 or 2010, where you felt like they were a good team, but you still had some question marks. Like with the Jets, it was that Mark Sanchez was a quarterback, and you didn't feel a little confidence in Mark Sanchez.
It was like
With
the
Mets here, it's
ceiling
like,
question.
right. With the Mets, it's that you obviously see when they play well what they can do, but at the same time, you feel like last year they were probably playing above their heads a little bit, and you still have some concerns about, is the rotation good enough to get you where you want to go, which is the World Series. So I think those are going to be the questions all year. I just think probably at a certain point, the Mets are going to get a top line starter at the deadline. Like last year, Garrett Crochet became available. If somebody like that comes up this year, I wouldn't be shocked if the Mets go after them, unless for some reason they just have a horrible first half. But I can't imagine that happening. So, no, I don't have a lot of. It's always easy to really overreact, but the Mets are now 2-2. Offense looked great tonight. I think the rotation will be good enough. I think they'll add somebody at the deadline in the rotation. The bullpen's actually been very good leading up to Edwin Diaz, which has been a little bit surprising. So I think they're a very good team. I just think even if they can get to the NLCS, the Dodgers are just so loaded that it's tough. And it's not even the Mets. It's just that you're dealing with a team that has a massive payroll, that has studs all over the lineup. Mookie Betts lost 30 pounds
Crazy.
in a week and a half, 2 weeks leading up to the season, or 25 pounds, whatever it was. And it seems like that just hasn't been a problem.
Still hitting home runs. Guys like
Still
40
hitting
pounds.
home runs. Although I did see today that Freddie Freeman apparently sprained, or he had a sprain in spring training, and he aggravated his right ankle sprain showering.
Wow.
So I can't imagine that's a long-term issue. But baseball players, like, you got to put baseball players in bubble wrap, because the way some of these guys get hurt in ridiculous ways. I saw one guy.
What was he doing in the shower? Oh my god.
He raises questions.
That's
Like,
how Al
can
Centrone hurt his back in the shower.
And there's been multiple stories of baseball players getting hurt in the shower or in weird ways. It's like, I'm 30 years old. I shower every day. I've never
Wait, hold on,
gotten.
hold on. We just started off this whole podcast saying how we wake up with neck aches from sleeping. So
That's
hold
true.
on.
I get neck aches from sleeping and my back hurts, but I've never showered and then gotten up and like, oh man, I think I sprained my ankle. So it's like baseball players, you never hear anybody in football say, oh, like Tom Brady can't play this week because he slept on a mattress that was too soft and he hurt his back. Like
Yeah.
it's only baseball players, but the Mets, when they play the Dodgers, it's a tough out because they have so many good players. It kind of reminds you a little bit of like the '90s Yankees. You could be a good team, but you're just going to have to run up against a team with Hall of Famers on it. So it's tough to expect the Mets to get to the World Series over the Dodgers.
Yeah, and for the record, Al Centrone did not hurt his back slipping in the shower, but it was a bit that I was running with on the air the other day, which was very fun. He was not loving it, or I mean, he was joking, obviously, but he was giving me crap because I kept bringing it up. But yeah, no, it's a good point, and Al also brings that all the time that these baseball players coming up with these injuries. It's so bizarre. It's like Giancarlo Stanton, both your elbows don't work. What were you doing, man? Like what are you doing with those elbows? You know what I'm saying? It's getting
Yeah,
a little weird
exactly.
over here. But no, it's a good point, and some people will say it's a loser's mentality for me as a Mets fan to say this, but obviously it depends how you lose. But if you go down in a tough fought series to the Dodgers, Braves, or Phillies, there's nothing to be ashamed about. You can be pissed, you can be upset and disappointed, but like those teams are just as good or better than your team. It's the same concept with the Knicks. If the Knicks lose to the Celtics and it's a 6-game series, or God forbid a 7, or even a really hard fought 5, you shouldn't sit there being like this season was a disaster, failure, losers, we suck. Like that's not the case. If you're not better than a team, if you can't realistically look in the mirror at your team and say, hey, we're not as good as them, but yeah, I still think we should beat them in the playoffs, then you're the problem. It's not the
Yeah.
team, right? So if you go ahead in the Mets and they lose to the Dodgers in the CS again, all right, here we go. That's baseball, Susan. The Dodgers are the best team in baseball. You lose to them, you shouldn't be ashamed. Obviously, you want to see them battle, you want to see them fight, you want to see them have their shots and get their shots in there, but that's okay. Like, that's okay. And some people will be like, that's a loser mentality. You can't think like that. Like, yeah, of course, if I was freaking playing center field, I wouldn't be thinking that. But guess what I'm doing? Talking on the fan or on Subway Sports Talk with you. So it's not my job to be this ultra competitive nut job. I'm here to watch. I'm here to tell you what I see. And I see a team that's not as good as the Dodgers and probably not as good as the Braves. And guess what? They're going to have to deal with that.
Yeah, especially last year with the Mets because going into last year, I don't think there was any Mets fans. You might have had some optimism something could happen,
Yeah.
but going into the year, I don't think any Mets fans expected them to go to the NLCS or even. I mean, you were just hoping maybe they could compete for the division
To make the
and get a
playoffs.
wild card spot,
Yeah.
just get in, right? And then not only do they get in, they get in dramatic fashion. Then they win against the Brewers in dramatic fashion. They get to the NLCS, and I remember hearing some people talk some like Twitter people saying that like if the Mets don't go to the World Series now, then all of this is just who even cares that this even happened. But and I kind of get tired a little bit of sports fans who have the championship or bust mentality,
Mm.
and it's one of the reasons why I'm so against tanking in the NBA. But it
I,
just seems like that's how everyone's going.
I thought you
You
were.
have
I thought you were going to say that's why I'm so against callers calling me up on the fan.
I'm just totally against that. It's the reason why I'm so against tanking is because you have all these guys who are only one team is going to win the finals. In baseball, only one team is going to win the World Series. And like even last year's Yankee season was incredibly. Watching Juan Soto and Aaron Judge hit for a full season was awesome. And even if they lost in the World Series, I want them to win, but it was still an enjoyable. Like the Yankee fans, I think there's no enjoyment of the season unless they win the World Series. Only one team is going to win it. And just, I mean, in basketball now, the Nets the other night played. Who did they even play? I forget. I think it might have been. Oh, it was the Clippers,
Mm.
and they were down. I mean, they were down 50 points in the third quarter, and it gets to where you're like, okay, great, you're tanking. You want to try to get a shot at a better lottery position, but is this really what you want to do? Is put this product on the field or on the court that is so bad that you're not even competitive with a team that's not even that good? That kind of mentality gets to be a little bit tiring. But with the Mets, they had no expectations going into last year. They have this awesome run. The problem is, like the Jets in '09 and in 2010, the expectations were, well, we should be able to win a Super Bowl. But at the time, you had Mark Sanchez at quarterback, and the Patriots had Tom Brady, and the Colts had Peyton Manning, and the Steelers had Big Ben. And kind of similarly now, the Mets got Juan Soto, but the Dodgers are still really good. The Braves are still a really good team. The Phillies still have a lot of good hitters. So it's like you do have the expectations, but you have to understand that it's not that easy to get to a World Series. Last year was kind of a magical run. You might come back to earth a little bit with some of these guys that were red hot in the playoffs last year. So I think you can't overreact. I think the Mets are a team that can go to the NLCS. I just don't totally. And I would even say if the Yankees were in the NL, I probably wouldn't expect them to go to the World Series either because
Right.
I don't think anyone can beat the Dodgers right now.
Right. I think if the truth serum existed, we can put it over Yankee fans at large and Mets fans at large, and it would show that last year was one of the most important years in New York baseball of our lifetime. And the reason I say that is because not only Mets fans have been going in and out of this competitiveness, but Yankee fans were so fed up with this 90 win, no chance to win the World Series. And when I say no chance, I don't mean actually no chance. I mean, like, it felt like they got to the doorstep year after year after year, and Yankee fans were sick of it. The fact that the Yankees actually got one step further and back to the World Series, it reinvigorated a lot of Yankee fans. And I know no Yankee fan will ever admit out loud that they were losing interest in a team or they weren't as locked in as they were in years past, but it was absolutely true. There was a malaise over the team in the Bronx that just made it to the playoffs every year and fell short every year. Last year was a really huge step, and you pair that with what happened with the Mets, and this New York baseball season is one of the most anticipated baseball seasons, I believe, with them combined in our lifetime. Is that
Yeah,
fair? Is that real?
it's definitely fair, and baseball is a funky sport where even if you have a good team, which is why sometimes when Yankee fans get all worked up that they got knocked out in the ALDS or the ALCS, it's a sport where in basketball, if you have the best team, generally you win.
Mm-hmm.
In football, if you dominate the line of scrimmage, for the most part, you have a pretty good chance. If you dominate the line of scrimmage, you have a good quarterback and you have a pretty good defense. You put yourself in a spot where there's not that many teams that can do that. And you might lose like the Lions this year dominated on the line of scrimmage, but they had a ton of injuries. Goff didn't play well in the playoffs. So you could still lose, but really good football teams, it's a little bit easier to get to the Super Bowl if you just have a good team. In baseball, just the nature of the sport, your best player, like Aaron Judge, your best player is still he's not going to homer every game. He's going to hit 300, but that means he's getting hits 3 out of 10 times. Guys get hot and they get cold. You could have bad pitching performances kind of randomly. So it's one of those sports where even if you have the best team, even if you win 105 games, especially now where like the Orioles last year got knocked out in the wild card round. The Orioles were a really good team last year.
Yeah.
They had Corbin Burns, their lineup was, they had Gunnar Henderson and Adley and all those guys. Like there was a really good team. They just got knocked out because it's a short series. Baseball's meant to be played over 162. It's one of the reasons I don't love that they expanded the playoffs because anything can happen, and then you have these short series, and it's I think it should just be back to where it was with 4 teams making the playoffs. But that's the way baseball is. Like the Mets are a good team. It's very likely they could just get bounced in a weird spot if they don't win the division. All of a sudden you're in a wild card game and it's do or die. You have like 2 bad games, it's over.
Yeah.
So it's a tough sport to win a championship. And Cashman talks about that all the time. Like he feels we have a really good team, but once you get to the playoffs, the other teams are good. They have good pitching, and it's like okay, we won 101 games in the regular season. We're obviously a good team. It's hard to predict what's going to happen once you get into the playoffs.
I believe I saw this stat. I might be 1 game off or 1 year off or something like that. But over the last 22 years since the year 2000, I believe it was 6 teams with the best record actually won the World Series.
Yeah.
I'm
And there's
curious
been no
what that
repeat
was.
champion
Right?
since
Yeah.
the Yankees.
No repeat since the three-peat
Yeah.
with the Yankees there. And I mean, you had like the Giants won every other year for like 2 or 3 years, something like that. They won like 2 and 4 or 3 and 6, something like to that effect. But 6 years out of 22, I'm sorry, my brain says it's 2022 apparently. 6 years out of 24, you only have 6 of the best records actually won the World Series. I'm curious what that number is in the other sports. I'm sure it's a little bit higher. It's probably not as high as we think because in basketball sometimes it's like the 1 seed in the East, but the 1 seed in the West wins. Better record. But still, 6
Yeah.
out of 24 is not a lot when you think about it. Like I'm sure it's much higher in those other sports, and that goes to show exactly your point to baseball being this game of variance and this game of streaks and this game of the big moments, and that's why I think so many people struggle with this idea of analytics because it's like, oh, you're going to make this decision every time because you think it'll work out in the long run. I don't care about the long run. I care about right here, right now. Make the bunt, move the runner, do the this, da da da, play the small ball. And everyone gets so worked up in that. And that's why they can't comprehend the idea of building over the aggregate, if you will. So
Right.
that's definitely a big piece of why so many people push back on the analytics stuff. But at this point, it's proven. Everyone does it. Everybody knows it, and it's starting to come back and recycle into something new. And that's exactly what we're going to see over these next few years of people being more aggressive on the base paths. I think some of the rule changes they made with the pitch clock and the bigger bases, all this stuff is creating variants, is creating new styles, and that's something that's very good for baseball. I mean, I'll speak for myself. I won't speak for you, but I haven't been this excited about a baseball season in a long time. And that doesn't include like midway through last year. I'm talking about preseason, first weeks. I'm tapped into Mets games. I'm tapped into Yankees games because you just feel the energy and that toxicity that we saw on day one of opening day was special. I mean, the hate, the vitriol that was between callers on the fan, host, Twitter people, the whole nine. Everybody's out with their biggest guns and just shooting shots at people. And it's fun, man. And as much as I hate some of the BS that comes out of it, because some of it's so dumb, and I'm sure we can agree on some of that, it is fun and exciting for New York.
Oh yeah, definitely. I've been looking forward to the season since Soto went to the Mets because now you have a spot where for a long time Yankee fans just poke fun at the Mets and that was kind of it. But now you have like a legitimate feeling of a rivalry between the Yankees and Mets, even though they're not in the same league, because every Yankee fan, and including me, some Yankee fans despise Juan Soto, and you're getting the Juan Soto chants at Yankee Stadium. So you got some people like me who I liked Soto, but there is part of me that kind of hopes maybe it doesn't work out with the Mets and he starts to struggle. Like it would be a little funny. I definitely don't want to see him hit 50 homers a year for the next 15 years
Fair.
across town in Queens. So you have a little bit of a rivalry. And you just feel like baseball. I think the pitch clock was a huge improvement.
Mm-hmm.
The games were, and I can say that I'm 30, so I was young during all those years. There wasn't a pitch clock, and there were games that just labored on.
Those
And
3.5-hour Yankee Red Sox games. Oh my God.
Yeah, or a 5-hour,
Oh,
9-inning Yankee Red Sox game in
Jesus.
07, I think it was. Every Yankee regular season Astro game went 3 hour, 45 minutes. And so the pitch clock was huge because for the most part now games are under 3 hours and moves pretty quick. Honestly, the torpedo bat, if it does work,
Bring it all back.
and baseball allows it, all of a sudden the hitting might go up a little bit because you can now custom design a bat and you have MIT guys that are looking at where the guy, where a player normally hits the ball. If let's just put a little bit more wood in that spot, so that can drive up hitting a little bit, which is good because that's been the one problem a lot of people have had. There's like no 300 hitters anymore. The starters don't go deep in games, but if all of a sudden guys are hitting a little bit more, that's good for the sport, and people want to see. And that's why I think baseball would. People are like, well, the Yankees are doing this, but at some point they're going to step in and ban it. But the only way they ban it is if the Yankees legitimately hit 9 home runs a game for the next 5 months, and it got to be where it was just ridiculous and unstoppable. If they are hitting more, and I don't even know how useful the torpedo bats were because the Brewers today got smoked by I think it was the Royals. So it might just be that the Brewers just have no pitching. I think that's probably what's more likely. So yeah, I was really excited for this year, and I think it'll be a lot of fun to watch Soto and see what he does. There'll be part of me that at the end of games, like the opening day game, he strikes out at the end of the game. I wouldn't say I was celebrating, but I did send a little trash talk to a couple of Mets fans, friends of mine. I had to throw it out there. I can't believe
it's fine.
you got to do it. I can throw out my little tweet that you can either pay $800 million for Juan Soto, or you can pay like minimum wage to Austin Wells, and they have the same numbers after 2 games. So it'll be a lot of fun this year.
Putting more wood in the right spot, by the way, is also how Freddie Freeman got hurt in the shower.
Yeah, that could be, honestly. Maybe that's how Stanton got hurt too. I don't know. We'll have to see.
Oh my God! Now I'm for it. I saw a text from my buddy during this podcast pop up. He's a Mets fan too, and he goes, "I hope everyone uses it. It'll be so fun because like we grew up in that peak steroid era, right? And the Bonds, his fourth mention on the podcast already. That era was out of control, and like Luis Gonzalez, 57 home runs. Sure.
Out of
It's
nowhere.
just like,
Yeah,
sure.
Miguel Tejada turns into like one of the best power hitters in baseball.
Yeah, that
That
was
was
my
like,
dude back in the day.
yeah, that was peak base, like 04, 03. Like anyone that's too young to remember that, like the '04 Yankee, '03, '04 ALCS are like two of the most
Crazy.
anticipated sporting events that I've ever watched. And part of it was the rivalry. Part of it, there was just a lot of, like if you go look at pitcher ERAs back then, I mean, if a guy had
Except for Pedro.
yeah, except for like if you had like a close to a 4 ERA, you were like pretty good. Most guys were 4.5 or mid threes was still pretty good, but guys were hitting like, and I'm one of those guys that I don't really care if players use steroids. That's why I think all these guys should get in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, put him in.
You can't tell me NFL players are not using something because a human being is not supposed to be. You look at a defensive tackle in the NFL, they're 6'2", 6'3". They're like 330. They can run close to a 5 second 40. A human being is just not supposed to be that big and that fast.
And the
It's just not.
recovery is the big thing too, right? It's all about the
Yeah,
recovery. It's like you're doing this much exertion and you're bouncing back in this many days to do it again. That's the crazy part. I'm
yeah.
totally with you, by the way. All these steroid guys, put them in. They're the best baseball players that we've ever seen. And yeah, of course, that helped. How much? Who knows? There's plenty of guys who took steroids who still weren't that good, right? Barry Bonds should be in the freaking Hall of Fame. Guy was out of
Yeah.
control. And even with this torpedo bat, you still got to put bat to ball, man. You still got to do it. I know there's a little extra wood in the right spot. How you doing? But Jazz Chisholm hits those 2 home runs. Like, he smoked those balls, man. Maybe it's a double off the wall. Maybe it's a grazing home run instead of, the 12th row. Those were great hits, okay? Like, whether the bat is the bat or not, like, it's all good. We're still watching good baseball players. And then the funniest thing, Connor, is people saying Aaron Judge after he hits 3 home runs, yeah, these bats are out of control. It's like, actually, he is confirmed one of the main guys not using the torpedo bat. But go ahead and get your tweets off, guys.
And I did like his answer when they asked him if he was using it. And he was basically like, "I don't really need to use it. I think my results speak for themselves over the last 3 years."
Yeah,
Like,
mic drop.
Judge is not all of a sudden turning into a power hitter because we're talking just a tiny, tiny little bit of an advantage from a regular bat for some of these guys.
Right.
Where Volpe they say he hit a little bit on the label, so you move the fatter part of the bat a little bit closer to the knob, and it helps. I mean, you're talking about a tiny, tiny difference in the bat, but I don't know why, years earlier no one thought of this. It's not against the rules.
Right.
They can decide after the fact. They can say, "Well, we don't want to allow this." But it was, the Patriots in 2014 in the playoffs against the Ravens. They ran the formation where they would they sat Shane Vereen in the slot, but he was an ineligible receiver, and then they put Michael Ho'omanawanui at left
Right.
tackle, and they ran the seam route, and you're like, well, we're not going to cover him; he's the left tackle, but he was eligible and he ran a route. Eventually, football stepped in and said, okay, you can't do that; it's too confusing. So baseball could step in and say, no, we're just going to go with regulation sizes or whatever. But if it's not against the rules, it's not against the rules. And I would imagine if this does increase run production and guys start hitting 300 again more often and the run totals go up, I would imagine baseball's probably sitting there saying, we
Great.
think this is awesome. We
Yeah.
love this.
And I'm curious what the ramifications will be over, more data, right? Because if the sweet spot is a little bigger, that means the other spots are not, right? So the end of the bat's a little thinner, the inside part of the bat's a little thinner, and are you going to see a residual effect of, more crappy hits? And, those sweet spot hits go a little further, but the rest of them don't, right? So there's a
Right.
reason why bats have been designed the way they are to get maximum sweet spot, to make the sweet spot bigger. This is more about, targeting in on the right sweet spot for the right person. And I'm just curious to see how that goes. Cause, if you see the bats, I'm gonna hold my water bottle here for anyone watching on YouTube. It's like a little thicker here, right? So if you hit the ball on this, like the side end of the sweet spot there, is there now a new trajectory on that ball? Because it seems like there's more of an angle there. So like, what's that going to do? Right? Are we going to get some crazy different types of hits here? I don't know. I'm just pontificating here.
And
but
I'm sure
interested.
you'll get data guys who are like, okay, so this guy's bat is designed in this way, and we've seen it on TV. So we're going to pitch it to his
Correct.
outside. We're going to pitch to the outside corner because he's got more of the sweet spot, towards the knob of the bat. Or some guys that might be a little bit further away, and then you pitch him on the inside. So it adds a little bit of a strategy. And
Pitchers
I
will
have had
adapt.
no
You're right.
Yeah, and I think most of the overreaction to it is just a lot of people hate the Yankees. They don't want to see them succeed. A lot of people kind of thought this would be a year where the Yankees might not be as good as they've been, and so they can make fun of them. And the Yankees have started the year with like a record pace of home runs. But I really don't. Do you really think there's a lot of people out there that are legitimately thinking like this is wrong or something like? I did see
Oh
Dave
yes,
Portnoy. You think
yeah.
there's a lot of people?
Well, I don't think they're being sane, but they do think it.
Yeah.
You know, of
Dave
course
Portnoy
they think
posted a
it.
big video, a big emergency press
Oh, he
conference
got
where he's
crushed
like,
on that. Yeah.
yeah, Jazz Chisholm responded to it.
Good, good. Honestly,
Yeah.
good, because I think he brought up Judge in that too. Is not one of these guys who didn't realize Judge wasn't using it, and it's like you can't be a Red Sox guy doing that video. Now, granted, Dave Portnoy does not care. He is
Yeah.
doing that to do exactly what he's doing: create buzz, crap on the Yankees, have fun. So all these people with true vitriol back at Dave, he doesn't care. So that is what it is. But yeah, like if you can't be the Red Sox guy or the Mets guy doing that to the Yankees, because you just look like a crybaby. You look like a
Yeah.
weenie to me, you know? But wait, I got
Yeah.
some stats for us for the podcast here. We got
Okay.
4 Barry Bonds mentions. We
Yeah.
got 2 mentions for Mark Sanchez. And we also got 2 mentions for, or maybe 3 mentions for MIT guy. Pretty good
How about
day.
that?
Pretty good day for MIT guy, if I must say.
Hey, we're analytics guys here. You know, we like analytics. We love it. We love guys from MIT. We love the nerdy MIT guys. We're huge
That's
about it.
5 MIT guy references. No, it's great. And honestly, let's see where it goes. Who's to say? Also, there's a guy I see on TikTok all the time. I think he's called like Baseball Bat Bro or something like that. And he just tests out all the bat. He's like a guy who made it to the minors, I believe, played high level college ball, and he'll just get every bat that's available in the market and like off a pitching machine, test out the exit velo and the sweet spot and all this stuff. I'm sure he'll have a torpedo bat video in the next week, and I can't wait to see it. Like I can't wait because
And
I'm interested.
it's weird because because you played college baseball, right?
Yeah,
So I played like high school baseball. Every bat you got was a little bit different. You can
yeah,
get a metal bat that had a little bit of a different sweet spot, or the DeMarini bat was a composite with there was like a top part was double barreled essentially, and then
right.
but if you got a hit if you hit it off the handle on a DeMarini, it would kill your hands. So I would never use that in cold weather. The stealth bat was a little different than an Easton bat, and so there's always been that. But in baseball, just in the major leagues or wood bats, like I played in a wood bat league when I was in high school, and you just sort of went and got a wood bat. That was
Right.
sort of it.
Well, in New York,
So
it was all wood. So in high school, we used wood in New York.
did you really?
Still do, yeah. So all New York City. I think it's just. I might be New York City, but I'm assuming it's all of New York State. But New York City for sure. The high school
Was it
is
a safety thing?
100% wood. I don't know, honestly. And I think about back to it. I go, you know what? Because I played college ball at TCNJ, and all my friends were basically from Jersey. I think there was one other kid or 2 other kids from out of state. And all these kids like, oh yeah, how many home runs did you have in your senior year? And they were like, yeah, I had like 14, 24, 27. Like the league leader in my league was like 4.
Yeah.
It was like, this is a different sport. How do we get recruited next to these guys?
Yeah.
Obviously the field comes into play as well. I'm like, I used wood when I first got to college playing with metal. It was my first time playing with metal since I was like 13. It was a
It's a
completely different thing for me.
and people, if you've never, some people are baseball fans, but they never really played baseball. The difference in hitting with a metal bat and hitting with a wood bat is the fact that a major league player can hit a ball like Aaron Judge into the upper deck 450, almost 500 feet with a wood bat.
Off
You have
98
to,
on the black.
yeah, like in the wood bat league that I played in, which was like an American Legion kind of thing. If you like, no one hit. You couldn't. No, I mean, maybe you get a single. There's a couple of doubles, but they were not like bomb. No one's hitting home runs with wood bats. It's impossible to hit with a wood bat.
Yeah, I'll never forget my buddy Mark. Shout out Mark Murray. He's a Yankee fan too, but screw him. He played at Seton Hall Prep, which is only about 25 minutes from where I grew up, but it's in Jersey. I grew up in Staten Island. And he was like, yeah, I had 14 home runs. I was like the 6th or 7th leading home run guy on my team. I'm like, what? I was like, I didn't see 14 home runs in my varsity career, not just for my team, for both teams
Yeah.
combined. And again, it's not because they're so much better than the competition we were playing with. We're playing with wood, and we're playing with different fields that are typically bigger. And it's like it's a different ball game completely. So
Yeah.
it's interesting. And also you got to think about every player has, like you mentioned before, a different type of bat. And back in the day, some of these dudes were swinging straight logs, brother. These things were nuts. You ever go like to those baseball museums or the Hall of Fame, and it's like, here's Ted Williams bat, and the thing is like enormous. It was like 45 ounces. It's
They
like,
gave us like a
what?
replica Babe Ruth bat, and that thing must have weighed like 50 pounds. I could barely pick it up. I was like, how
It's
is he swinging this
insane.
thing?
And that's
It's
why their swings look
ridiculous.
so weird. Oh my
Yeah.
God. That's good stuff, Connor. Great time having you on. I do have one question for you
Yes.
before we go. We'll throw this out here real quick. Do you have any stories for us? So you, just to give some background, if people didn't pick up 2 and 2 already, you work at the Fan full time. You've been there for a while. So right now you work mostly with the likes of the Keith McPhersons and the McMonacles. Obviously, you're crossing paths with the Evan and Tiki people pretty much every single day, all the weekend crews, but also the legends, the Franceses, the Steve Summers, the Jody Macks, all this stuff. You have any fun stories for anyone who never worked in the world of radio? You have anything that stands out when you're producing or board opping or picking up calls for someone like that that you would like to share with the people?
I wasn't here for this one, but I've heard this story a good amount of times. Steve Summers, the legendary Steve Summers,
Mm-hmm.
who does have a podcast coming out with our good friend Paul
Oh, shout
Rosenberg.
out. Yeah.
I've heard the story from a bunch of different people. Everyone laughs about it. But he's a big cigarette smoker.
Mm.
So there was one time when he used to, he'd have to go downstairs, take the elevator, smoke, and then come back up. And the way Steve's shift worked is that he would do that little show at the beginning, then it would usually be like a Yankee game or something, and then he'd come on afterwards. So I think that was the story, is that he went downstairs to have a smoke after his shorter, like the bridge show that we have now. He did that. He went downstairs. Something happened. He smoked, and then he tried coming back up, and he got stuck in the elevator. And I think I don't know if he had his phone, because I don't think Steve really has a phone. So I think the story was that no one could find him, and they were looking around for him at the end of one of the games. They didn't know where he was. And I don't even really know how he got out, but Steve was just stuck in the elevator. I think they had to have somebody else come in and finish the show because they didn't know where he was.
Oh my God.
So that's a classic Steve Summers story.
That is such a classic summer story. I feel like I heard it from Rosenberg, and I want to wish that it was Rosie running around the newsroom looking for Steve.
I
like
wouldn't be
checking.
surprised if it was probably Rosenberg.
Yeah, and Steve's in the elevator. Me here, you there.
Me here, stuck in the elevator, and you there. Yeah.
Oh my God, that's fantastic. And a good segue to shout out Steve Summers and Rosenberg's podcast coming out.
Oh yeah,
On the Odyssey. I guess it's on the Odyssey Network, right? Probably.
I think so. Yeah, I'm not exactly sure. I did see Paul's tweet about it, and he told me about it, but I don't know where exactly. I'm sure it'll be Spotify, Apple Podcasts.
Yeah, the whole nine.
All that
The whole
stuff.
nine.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Connor Green, this was fantastic. Connor, if someone calls in, maybe if someone listening to this podcast, they call into the Fan 1-888-808-1019, the new number, and they call in and be like, "Yo, heard you on Subway Sports Talk." I don't know if it'll make Connor's day, but it will definitely make my day. So call up when Connor's working. Say what up. Get on the Fan. He'll treat you nice. He's a good dude, obviously.
I would love that. I always enjoy and appreciate flattery and people saying nice things about me.
Yeah.
So anytime you want to do it.
Now someone's gonna call in and be like, "Yo, you're off
You
about
sucked."
the Yankees. They're gonna
Yeah.
fucking suck this year."
You're a Yankee shill. You're an idiot.
I
Yeah.
saw you on the YouTubes. You had the Yankee shirt on. I couldn't trust a word you said.
Yeah, you suck. You're rooting against Soto. You stink. Yeah.
Fantastic. Connor _Green51 on X. Ugh, I hate saying X. That's one N in Connor. Connor, any last words for Subway Sports Talk?
No, that's about it. Thanks for having me on, Pete. I'd be happy to come on anytime. So just let me know.
Cheers, man. I appreciate it. Subway Sports Talk. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, review on socials at Subway Sports Talk, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, X, the whole nine. Appreciate y'all for listening. It's baseball season, baby. We also have more hoops talk coming up as the Knicks, I think, are down to like 8 or 10 games left, something like that. And obviously the NFL draft at the end of the month. So we'll be hitting on all that stuff. And of course, more baseball. T.O. Allen Friends on YouTube on Uptown Sports Talk, Uptown Sports TV, 8 o'clock on Thursday. My words are all off now. I said 8 o'clock. I don't know what's going on. That's time to end the podcast. Subway Sports Talk. Thanks for listening. Cheers.